What if I told you wrestling's most famous millionaire character was created for a wrestler who got screwed out of millions in real life? Ted DiBiase transformed from a respected technical wrestler into the $1 Million Man. But behind his arrogant character was a performer dealing with broken promises and political games. From his father's death in the ring to his controversial exits from both WWE and WCW, this is the untold story of talent versus politics. But Ted's story begins with tragedy that would shape everything about his approach to wrestling. July 2nd, 1969. The Lubbock Municipal Coliseum in Texas was packed with wrestling fans expecting another routine show. Iron Mike DiBiase stepped through the ropes for what would be his final match. In the crowd sat his 15-year-old adopted son Theodore, watching like he had dozens of times before. But this night was different. This night would change everything. Iron Mike collapsed in the ring during his match against Man Mountain Mike. Heart attack. Seven-time NWA World Champion Harley Race rushed to the ring and performed CPR, but was unable to save him. The man who had raised Ted since he was 7 years old was gone in an instant. Ted watched his father die doing what he loved most. The same ring that had given Iron Mike his livelihood had taken his life. Most teenagers would never want to see a wrestling ring again. Ted was not most teenagers. The trauma hit the family hard. Ted's mother Helen struggled with depression and alcoholism after losing her husband. She knew she had to get her son away from wrestling. She packed up their lives in Texas and moved Ted to Willcox, Arizona, to live with his grandparents. The plan was simple: start fresh. Keep Ted away from the wrestling world that had destroyed their family. But Ted couldn't escape it. He threw himself into football and eventually earned a scholarship to West Texas State University. He was a natural athlete with size and coordination that made coaches take notice. Ted excelled on the football field, earning recognition as one of the team's best players. The coaches thought they had found their next college recruit. Behind the football success, wrestling consumed Ted's thoughts. He watched matches on television whenever he could. He studied the technical aspects of the sport that had killed his father. His family noticed his obsession and worried about where it might lead. They had moved across state lines to get away from wrestling, but wrestling had followed them to Arizona. When an injury ended his football career in his senior year, Ted saw it as a sign. He dropped out of college to pursue the career that had been calling him since that night in Lubbock. The Funk family ran one of wrestling's most respected training facilities in Texas. Dory Funk Sr. had built a reputation for developing technical wrestlers who could work anywhere in the world. His sons Terry and Dory Jr. had become stars using the fundamentals their father taught them. When word reached them about Iron Mike's son showing interest in wrestling, they paid attention. Terry and Dory Jr. saw something special in the grieving young man when Ted finally made contact. They understood his motivation was different from other kids who wanted to be wrestlers. This wasn't about fame or money. This was about honoring a father's memory and proving that tragedy didn't have to define a family's relationship with wrestling. The Funks agreed to train Ted despite his family's concerns. The training became Ted's therapy. Every drill, every practice match, every technical lesson helped him process the grief that had been eating at him since that night in Lubbock. The Funk brothers taught him that wrestling could be done safely if you respected the sport and your opponents. They showed him techniques his father never had the chance to pass down. Ted learned that he could honor Iron Mike's memory by being better than his father ever was. Ted's natural athletic ability combined with his emotional drive created something special on the wrestling mats. He absorbed everything the Funks taught him about chain wrestling, submission holds, and ring psychology. The technical aspects of wrestling came naturally to him. But more important was his attitude. Ted approached training with a seriousness that impressed veteran wrestlers who visited the Funk facility. The other trainees noticed Ted was different. He wasn't there to play around or live out childhood fantasies. Wrestling was his way of dealing with loss and finding purpose after trauma. The intensity he brought to every training session separated him from other hopefuls who came and went. Ted was building the foundation for what would become one of wrestling's most technically sound careers. His family slowly accepted that Ted was going to wrestle whether they supported him or not. The move to Arizona had been meant to end his wrestling dreams, but it had only delayed them. The Funk brothers convinced Ted's mother that they would prepare him properly for a career that could honor his father's legacy instead of repeating his tragedy. This early loss shaped how Ted would handle every success and failure in his wrestling career. The politics, the broken promises, the controversial exits from major promotions would all be filtered through the lens of losing his father at 15. Wrestling had taken Iron Mike away, but it had also given Ted a way to process grief and build a future. Now, he had to prove himself in a business that showed no mercy to inexperienced wrestlers. Run. He developed the arrogant, rich character that would later make him famous, but in a more subtle way than his WWF version. His loaded black glove became his signature finishing move. Ted would pull the black glove from his tights to knock out opponents when the referee wasn't looking. The crowd hated the underhanded tactic, and Ted discovered he was a natural at making people hate him. Ted defeated Dick Slater to become Missouri State Champion in February 1978, only to lose the title to Dick Murdoch after a few weeks. The brief championship reign proved he could carry a title and draw money for promoters, even if the run was short. Promoters started calling other territories to book Ted for their biggest shows. Word spread that Ted could work with anyone and make them look good. The NWA territorial system allowed Ted to refine different aspects of his wrestling abilities. In Georgia, he endured one of wrestling's most legendary angles when the fabulous Freebirds gave him 4 pile drivers, 1 on concrete and 3 in the ring. The brutal beating was so convincing that audience members were crying, thinking Ted had been seriously injured. This demonstrated his commitment to selling an angle and his toughness in taking punishment for the sake of the story. Back in Mid-South, Ted's heel character reached new heights when he turned against the popular Junkyard Dog and formed the Rat Pack with Jim Duggan and Matt Bourne. The group's arrogant antics made them one of the territory's most hated acts. Ted's eventual feud with Duggan culminated in a loser leaves town match, showcasing his ability to work compelling storylines with former allies. His technical abilities impressed wrestlers who had been in the business for decades. Ted could chain wrestle with the best scientific wrestlers, but he could also brawl with the toughest street fighters. He studied videotapes of great wrestlers and incorporated their best moves into his own style. Ted became known as someone who could work any style required for a particular match. By the early 1980s, Ted had transformed from the grief-stricken teenager who trained with the Funks into one of wrestling's most polished performers. His technical skills were among the best in the business, but more importantly, he understood the psychology of professional wrestling. Promoters across different territories recognized Ted as someone who could headline their biggest shows. Ted had proven himself in the American territorial system, but the ultimate test of any wrestler's abilities lay across the Pacific Ocean. All Japan Pro Wrestling in 1983 was where American wrestlers went to prove they were legitimate or get destroyed trying. Ted entered AJPW that year and immediately faced the cultural barriers that had broken other foreign wrestlers. The matches were stiffer than anything in American territories. Japanese fans had no patience for American wrestlers who couldn't adapt to their style of wrestling. The language barrier created problems that went beyond simple communication. American wrestlers couldn't understand what their opponents were calling in the ring. They missed important cues from referees and ring announcers. Ted's first major breakthrough came on October 14, 1983, when he won the NWA United National Championship by defeating Jerry Lawler by forfeit in a tournament. This wasn't a consolation prize given to a foreign wrestler. Ted had to prove himself against legitimate Japanese stars to earn that championship. His title reign showed Japanese promoters and fans that he understood their wrestling culture and could carry storylines as a singles competitor. He lost the title to Michael Hayes on January 28, 1984, but the reign had established his credibility in Japan. 2 months after losing the championship, Ted faced personal tragedy when his mother, Helen Hild, died on March 4, 1984. The loss hit him hard, but wrestling had taught him to channel grief into motivation. His technical wrestling ability impressed Japanese wrestlers who were known for their scientific approach to the sport. He could chain wrestle with the best Japanese technicians and hold his own in submission exchanges. His background training under the Funk brothers had prepared him for exactly this type of wrestling environment. In August 1985, Ted formed a legendary partnership when Stan Hansen chose him to replace Bruiser Brody as his tag team partner. They immediately became PWF Tag Team Champions, creating one of the most successful foreign tag teams in Japanese wrestling history. Ted and Hansen complemented each other perfectly in the ring. Hansen brought the raw power and intensity that Japanese fans expected from American wrestlers. Ted provided the technical skills and wrestling psychology that elevated their matches beyond simple brawling. Their dominance reached its peak when Ted and Hansen won the 1985 World's Strongest Tag Determination League, finishing in first place with 7 points. This tournament victory showcased their ability to work with different styles and adapt to various opponents while maintaining championship-level performance. Japanese fans noticed Ted's willingness to take punishment and dish it out in return. American wrestlers who tried to protect themselves or work a softer style were rejected immediately by Japanese audiences. The physical demands of Japanese wrestling pushed Ted to improve aspects of his game that might have remained underdeveloped in American territories. He learned to work a stiffer style without injuring his opponents or himself. His stamina improved dramatically because Japanese matches often went longer than American territory matches. Ted developed a better understanding of crowd psychology in a completely different cultural context. Their PWF Tag Team Championship reign lasted nearly 2 years until they lost the titles to Jumbo Tsuruta and Tiger Mask on July 3, 1987. But Ted and Hansen regained the championship just 8 days later, proving their dominance wasn't finished. However, their second reign was cut short when they were stripped of the titles due to Ted leaving for the WWF. This abrupt ending would mark a significant transition in Ted's career. Ted would return to AJPW in September 1993, reforming his team with Hansen and winning the World Tag Team Championship from the Holy Demon Army. But his body had taken years of punishment, and he suffered neck and back injuries that limited him to one match in the World's Strongest Tag Determination League before being replaced by Giant Baba. The injuries were a reminder that even the toughest wrestlers couldn't escape the physical toll of the business. His success in Japan elevated Ted's reputation worldwide and opened doors that might have remained closed if he had stayed in American territories. Wrestling promoters around the world knew that succeeding in All Japan Pro Wrestling meant a wrestler had legitimate skills and toughness. The international credibility Ted earned in Japan would become crucial as American wrestling began changing in the mid-1980s. His technical skills, combined with his international experience, had positioned him perfectly for opportunities that would completely transform his career. When Vince McMahon came calling in 1987, Ted was locked in talks with the NWA about his future. But McMahon made an offer that changed everything. Pat Patterson convinced Ted to sign by telling him about a gimmick that McMahon would give himself if he were to wrestle. The promise of a serious push and a character with real potential was too good to pass up. The World Wrestling Federation was expanding from a regional territory into a national entertainment company. McMahon needed characters that could work on television and appeal to mainstream audiences beyond traditional wrestling fans. He wasn't looking for just good wrestlers anymore. He wanted personalities that could carry storylines and sell merchandise. Ted had proven himself as a technical wrestler, but McMahon saw something else in him. He saw the perfect person to play wrestling's ultimate rich villain. Ted made a brief return as a babyface on May 15, 1987, at a house show, but the real plan was already in motion. On June 26th, he turned heel by attacking his tag team partner Sam Houston, setting up the debut of his new character. The $1 Million Man was the complete opposite of everything Ted had built his career on. For years, he had earned respect through technical wrestling and hard work in brutal territories. Now McMahon was asking him to become a cartoon villain who bragged about his wealth and looked down on everyone else. The transformation started with the wardrobe and backstory. Ted traded his simple wrestling gear for expensive suits and flashy jewelry. The $1 Million Man was billed as having multiple seasonal residences, including Palm Beach, Florida, Hyannisport, Massachusetts, Bel Air, California, and the Netherlands Antilles. The gold lame suits became his signature look. He wore designer sunglasses and carried himself like someone who had never worked a day in his life. Everything about the character was designed to make people hate him for having things they could never afford. Ted had to learn how to cut promos that were completely different from his previous wrestling persona. The $1 Million Man talked down to fans and wrestlers like they were beneath him. He bragged about his wealth and made it clear that he thought money made him better than everyone else. The character required Ted to be arrogant and condescending in ways that went against his natural personality. Virgil changed everything about how the character worked. The name was either based on NWA Booker Dusty Rhodes, whose real name was Virgil Runnels, or disputed by Bruce Pritchard depending on who you asked. Having a black bodyguard who was clearly being humiliated and treated poorly added racial undertones that made the $1 Million Man even more hateable. Virgil carried Ted's bags, shined his shoes, and took abuse from his boss in front of crowds. The relationship made Ted seem like someone who enjoyed having power over other people. The WWF offices gave Ted a stipend of petty cash to throw money around in public, effectively blurring the lines between fiction and reality. The vignettes were brilliant pieces of character development that aired during WWE programming. Ted would appear at restaurants, country clubs, and public pools where he would bribe people to do humiliating things for money. He made kids give up their seats at basketball games. He paid people to kiss his feet or bark like dogs. In the famous vignette where he kicked a ball away from a child, everyone who wasn't paid on camera was actually paid off camera, according to his autobiography. These segments made the $1 Million Man seem untouchable and morally corrupt. The catchphrase captured something that felt uncomfortably real about wealthy people. When Ted said, "Everybody has a price," it didn't sound like a wrestling catchphrase. It sounded like something an actual rich person might say about buying people's principles. His finishing move, the $1 Million Dream, was a rib on Dusty Rhodes' nickname, the American Dream. The $1 Million Championship belt was creative genius that solved a booking problem. Ted needed to seem important and championship level without actually winning a real title. The custom belt was presented as being more valuable than any official WWE championship. The belt gave him something to carry and defend while keeping him away from the actual title picture. Within months, Ted had gone from being a respected technical wrestler to being the most hated person in WWE. The character was so effective that it completely overshadowed his wrestling abilities. The success created new expectations that would be tested when the biggest opportunity of his career finally arrived. The real test came when Ted tried to buy his way to the top. His first major championship angle involved attempting to purchase the WWF World Heavyweight Championship directly from Hulk Hogan. When Hogan refused to sell, Ted approached Andre the Giant with a different proposition. He would pay Andre to win the title for him. The plan worked better than anyone expected. On February 5, 1988, during the main event Y, Andre defeated Hogan under questionable circumstances that included the infamous evil twin referee debacle. But Andre's victory was just the beginning of Ted's master plan. After winning the championship, Andre announced he was surrendering the belt to Ted. The $1 Million Man had finally bought his way to wrestling's most prestigious title. For several days, Ted was actually billed as World Heavyweight Champion. He defended the title once against Bam Bam Bigelow and appeared at 3 house shows as the recognized champion. The storyline felt real because Ted carried himself like a legitimate title holder. He had the belt, the booking, and the credibility that came with being presented as WWE's top champion. WWF President Jack Tunney destroyed Ted's championship dreams with a single announcement. Tunney declared that Ted was not the champion because he didn't win the title by pin or submission. Since Andre had surrendered the belt rather than losing it in competition, the championship was vacated. Andre's win was recognized, making it the shortest world title reign in WWF history. But Ted was left with nothing despite having possession of the belt. WrestleMania 4 was supposed to provide redemption through the tournament format. Ted was positioned as one of the favorites, and his path seemed designed for success. He defeated Hacksaw Jim Duggan in the first round and Don Morocco in the quarterfinal. His semi-final victory over Morocco was a wrestling clinic that reminded everyone why he had succeeded in territories in Japan before becoming the $1 Million Man. Ted received a bye to the finals because Hogan and Andre were double eliminated in their semi-final match. Andre later revealed that Ted had paid him to ensure Hogan didn't advance, adding another layer to the storyline about money-buying championship opportunities. Everything was falling into place for Ted's coronation as WWE Champion. The final match against Randy Savage should have been Ted's moment. The storyline logic was perfect, and Ted had the heat, wrestling ability, and character motivation to be a credible champion. But Hulk Hogan interfered to negate Andre's assistance, helping Savage win the championship. Once again, external factors had prevented Ted from capturing the title that seemed destined to be his. The Megabucks tag team formation with Andre felt like consolation booking for someone who deserved better treatment. Ted and Andre faced Hogan and Savage as the Mega Powers at the inaugural SummerSlam in 1988, where Hogan pinned Ted to end the feud. The match was positioned as a major storyline, but it moved Ted away from singles championship contention where he belonged. Ted's frustrations with his booking situation started affecting his performances and attitude backstage. He had done everything WWE asked of him as the $1 Million Man character. His heel work was among the best in the company, and his wrestling ability was proven at the highest levels. Yet he kept getting passed over for championship opportunities that went to other wrestlers. The 1988 King of the Ring tournament provided some redemption after the WrestleMania disappointment. Ted defeated Brutus Beefcake, Ken Patera, Ron Bass, and Randy Savage to win the tournament and secure his first major WWF success. The victory maintained his credibility as a main event performer, but it wasn't the same as holding the WWE Championship that had been so close at WrestleMania 4. The near miss at WrestleMania 4 became the defining moment that haunted Ted's entire WWE run. He had been positioned perfectly to win the championship and had the skills to carry the title successfully. Wrestling fans and industry observers began speculating about whether backstage politics were preventing him from reaching his full potential. The pattern was becoming clear that Ted would be kept just close enough to the top to maintain his heat, but never allowed to actually reach it. Something else would have to satisfy his championship ambitions. The $1 Million Championship became a creative solution born from his inability to secure the actual WWF Championship through conventional means, allowing him to maintain a championship-level presence without disrupting the main title picture. Ted commissioned the belt to be made with real diamonds and gold plating that cost about $50,000 to produce. In kayfabe, it represented $1 million in gold and diamonds. The craftsmanship was exceptional. The belt looked more expensive and prestigious than the actual WWF Championship that Hulk Hogan carried. Ted treated his custom title like it was the most important championship in wrestling. He polished it before every appearance and protected it like it contained actual secrets to his wealth. The $1 Million Championship was created because Ted couldn't buy or win the WWF World Heavyweight Championship despite his character's wealth and schemes. The belt was mostly a prop to accentuate Ted's pomposity after he couldn't get the desired return on his investment for the real title. But Ted's presentation made it feel legitimate through sheer force of personality and commitment to the character. Ted's promos about his custom championship created an interesting situation where fiction and reality seemed to blur together. He claimed the $1 Million Championship was worth more than any other title in wrestling because of its actual monetary value. Ted said other champions carried cheap metal and fake jewels, while his belt contained real wealth. The promos felt like Ted was shooting on the wrestling business and pointing out how artificial most championship belts really were. Fans started treating the $1 Million Championship like a legitimate title, even though it had no official status. Ted defended it in matches and carried it to the ring like any other champion. It actually was defended on occasion. Ted outlasted sworn enemy Jake the Snake Roberts via count-out at WrestleMania 6 in order to save his precious property. Crowds reacted to the belt like it mattered in storylines. The championship became real through crowd reaction and Ted's presentation, even though WWE never officially recognized it. Wrestling insiders understood the irony of Ted's situation perfectly. The man playing wrestling's richest character was potentially losing millions in real earning potential by not holding the actual WWF Championship. Main event champions received higher pay scales and better booking opportunities. Ted was generating massive heat and drawing money for the company while being denied the financial rewards that came with championship status. Ted's unique title history revealed something remarkable about his wrestling career. His initial reign as WWF North American Heavyweight Champion in 1979 in WWF was awarded, not won in a match. His 2019 WWE 24/7 Championship was acquired by purchase, not competition. Ted's only televised title win by pinfall or submission was regaining the $1 Million Championship from Virgil. This pattern showed how his character's reliance on money and shortcuts had become reality throughout his career. The elaborate presentation of the $1 Million Championship masked deeper problems with how WWE treated its most talented performers. Ted had proven himself in every wrestling environment, from territories to Japan to national television. His heel work was among the best in the company, yet he remained stuck in a character role that prevented him from reaching the top of the promotion. The Custom Championship became a symbol of creative limitations rather than creative freedom. Ted's singular achievement was holding 4 different singles championships in WWE without winning any of them in an official match. The $1 Million Championship, the disputed WWF Championship, the North American title, and the 24/7 Championship were all acquired through methods other than defeating an opponent cleanly. This unique distinction in wrestling history highlighted how his character had shaped his entire career trajectory. The championship represented the glass ceiling that even the most talented performers couldn't break through if backstage politics worked against them. Ted had everything needed to be a successful WWE champion: technical skills, character work, crowd heat, and proven drawing power. The $1 Million Championship gave him a consolation prize that looked impressive, but didn't change his actual position in the company hierarchy. The belt became Ted's legacy in ways that probably weren't intended when it was created. Wrestling fans remember the $1 Million Championship more than most legitimate titles from that era. The custom belt represented something unique in wrestling history, where a performer created his own championship and made it feel important through presentation skills alone. But Ted's career needed to evolve beyond the limitations that even his greatest creative success couldn't overcome. The formation of Money Inc. offered a new path forward through tag team wrestling. Tag team wrestling was where careers went to die in most wrestlers' minds. Singles stars who got moved into tag teams were usually being demoted or pushed aside for younger talent. Ted found himself in exactly this situation after his singles championship opportunities dried up. The $1 Million Man character had generated massive heat, but hadn't translated into the WWE Championship reign that seemed inevitable. WWE needed a new direction for Ted that would keep him relevant without threatening the established championship hierarchy. Mike Rotunda had been working as Erwin R. Shyster, a tax collector character who bored audiences with lectures about paying their taxes. The IRS gimmick was clever but limited. Rotunda needed a partner who could elevate the character and create storylines that went beyond simple tax jokes. Ted's $1 Million Man persona was the perfect complement to a tax collector. Rich guy meets government agent. Corporate greed meets bureaucratic power. The chemistry between Ted and IRS worked immediately because both characters represented things that regular people hated about authority figures. Ted was the wealthy boss who looked down on his employees. IRS was the government bureaucrat who made people's lives miserable with paperwork and penalties. Together, they became Money Inc., a team that embodied everything fans hated about corporate America. Their entrance music and coordinated outfits made them look like they had walked out of a boardroom meeting. Their first WWF Tag Team Championship victory on February 7, 1992, came when they defeated the Legion of Doom. The hasty title switch came as a result of Road Warrior Hawk flunking a drugs test, creating an unexpected opportunity for Money Inc. The Nasty Boys were originally scheduled for the title shot that went to Ted and IRS instead. The team's success wasn't just about their character work. Ted's technical wrestling abilities complemented IRS's methodical style perfectly. Ted could work the exciting portions of matches while IRS controlled the pace and built heat through rest holds and heel tactics. The Legion of Doom feud showcased Ted's ability to work with completely different wrestling styles and personalities. Hawk and Animal were power wrestlers who relied on intensity and crowd participation. Ted had to adjust his heel tactics to work against opponents who were more popular with fans than most face teams. The The contrast between Money Inc.'s corporate presentation and LOD's Road Warrior gimmick created natural storyline tension that translated into successful pay-per-view matches. Their attacks on Brutus Beefcake, and later their manager Jimmy Hart for being disgusted by their actions, led to Hulk Hogan challenging Money Inc. This setup created the storyline for their WrestleMania 9 match and demonstrated how Ted could generate heat that drew major stars into feuds. Their rivalry with the Natural Disasters required different skills from Ted as a performer. Earthquake and Typhoon were massive wrestlers who used their size advantage to dominate opponents. Ted had to find ways to make the team's heel tactics work against opponents who could simply overpower them in most situations. Money Inc.'s second and third championship reigns demonstrated their staying power as a drawing team. 2 of their 3 tag title wins did not take place on TV, continuing the unusual pattern of Ted's championship history, where his biggest victories happened away from television audiences. They weren't just a temporary pairing that got lucky with one title run. Ted and IRS developed genuine chemistry as partners who understood each other's strengths and weaknesses. The Steiner brothers' matches were crucial for Ted's development as a performer who could keep up with wrestling's changing landscape. Scott and Rick Steiner represented the new generation of athletic wrestlers who combined technical skills with impressive physical abilities. The $1 Million Corporation became Ted's platform to demonstrate his ability to build stars instead of just being one. Managing a stable of wrestlers required different skills than being a singles competitor or tag team partner. Ted had to scout talent, develop characters, and guide multiple wrestlers through storylines simultaneously. The corporate presentation fit perfectly with his $1 Million Man persona while giving him real power behind the scenes to influence careers. The stable included an impressive roster of talent that showcased Ted's eye for diverse wrestling abilities. IRS brought technical skills and heel psychology from their successful Money Inc. partnership. Bam Bam Bigelow added main event credibility and athletic ability that few big men could match. Nikolai Volkov provided veteran experience and international appeal. Kama brought legitimate martial arts background and intimidating presence. King Kong Bundy offered old-school monster heel dynamics. Psycho Sid delivered unpredictable intensity and natural charisma. Tatanka contributed technical wrestling skills and a unique cultural presentation that stood out on the roster. Steve Austin arrived in WWE as a talented but generic wrestler who needed direction. The Ringmaster character was everything wrong with wrestling in the mid-1990s. Plain black tights, no personality, and a finishing move called the $1 Million Dream that put people to sleep literally and figuratively. Austin had legitimate wrestling ability from his time in WCW, but the Ringmaster gimmick buried everything interesting about him under corporate-approved blandness. Ted later claimed he saw Austin's potential and introduced him to opportunities that would help develop his character work and promo skills. The lessons Ted learned from years of character development were being shared with a wrestler who would eventually surpass all of his teachers. Austin's natural intensity and charisma needed the right presentation to connect with audiences, and working within the $1 Million Corporation provided that framework. Ted's involvement in the WrestleMania 11 main event with Bam Bam Bigelow showed he remained relevant in WWE's biggest storylines. Managing Bigelow against Lawrence Taylor wasn't the most prestigious assignment, but it demonstrated that WWE still trusted Ted with important responsibilities. His work at ringside during the match helped make a celebrity versus wrestler contest more believable than it had any right to be. Austin's development under Ted's guidance included character work that planted seeds for everything that would make Stone Cold successful. The intensity and anger that would later make Austin a star were being refined during his time as the Ringmaster. The corporate-approved character was too limiting for someone with Austin's natural charisma and intensity, but Ted could see the potential waiting to be unleashed. The $1 Million Corporation started falling apart as members were reassigned to different storylines or released from the company. Ted watched wrestlers he had worked to develop get moved to roles that didn't utilize their abilities properly. The stable that was supposed to showcase his managerial skills became another example of how backstage politics could derail even the most promising concepts. Austin's departure from the $1 Million Corporation happened just before he would transform into Stone Cold Steve Austin. Ted lost the chance to guide one of wrestling's biggest stars through his career-defining character change. The timing was heartbreaking for Ted because he had invested significant time and effort into Austin's development, only to see other people get credit for his eventual success. Ted's last appearance with WWE in this run was at In Your House Beware of Dog 2 in 1996, where he was kayfabe forced to leave the WWF after Steve Austin lost to Savio Vega. The stipulation match created a storyline reason for Ted's departure, but in reality, he was leaving for WCW. The $1 Million Corporation had proven he could develop talent and create compelling storylines as a non-wrestling character. But corporate wrestling was about to test his adaptability in ways he never expected. WCW offered Ted a fresh start, but the company's internal politics would prove even more destructive than anything he had experienced in WWE. Ted debuted in WCW on August 26, 1996, as the fourth member of the New World Order, joining Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Hollywood Hogan while claiming to finance the group. The group jokingly referred to him as Trillionaire Ted, satirizing billionaire Ted Turner in a move that demonstrated WCW's willingness to mock their own owner for storyline purposes. WCW in 1996 was experiencing unprecedented success with the New World Order storyline, and Monday Nitro's ratings war against WWE Raw. Eric Bischoff had transformed the company from a regional Southern promotion into a legitimate threat to Vince McMahon's wrestling empire. The influx of former WWE stars like Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash had created mainstream attention that WCW had never experienced. Ted's arrival should have been another major acquisition that strengthened their roster and added credibility to their programming. Ted served as the spokesperson for the NWO for 3 months until Eric Bischoff joined the NWO and replaced him in that role. The demotion was the beginning of creative frustrations that would define Ted's entire WCW experience. His $1 Million Man persona remained popular with wrestling fans who remembered his WWE success. But Bischoff's creative vision focused heavily on the NWO storyline and the mainstream appeal of former WWE stars who were part of the main invasion angle. Eric Bischoff's approach to booking WCW programming prioritized quick storyline fixes and celebrity appearances that generated immediate ratings spikes rather than sustained character development. Ted wanted to rebuild his character gradually and create storylines that showcased his abilities as both a wrestler and a manager. The fundamental disagreement about creative direction created immediate tension between the two men. Ted's frustration with his reduced role in the NWO led to a confrontation that would define his WCW experience. As he later explained, Eric Bischoff doesn't know that much about wrestling. Eric took credit for the NWO, but that wasn't his idea. Originally, I was supposed to be the mouthpiece of the NWO. I just went to him one day and told him, I'm not just going to walk out there and be Hulk Hogan's Virgil. You hired me to be the spokesperson for this, so if that's not what I'm going to do, you can send me home. The arguments between Ted and Bischoff became common knowledge backstage as both men refused to compromise on their creative differences. Ted felt his experience and track record should give him more input into how his character was presented and used in storylines. Bischoff believed his position as head of creative gave him final authority over all character decisions regardless of individual wrestler preferences. The disagreements created tension that affected other wrestlers and backstage personnel who had to work around the conflict. After his NWO departure, Ted's success managing the Steiner brothers to WCW World Tag Team Championship gold proved his abilities as a manager hadn't diminished. Rick and Scott Steiner were talented, but needed guidance to reach their potential as heel characters. Ted managed the Steiner brothers until Scott Steiner turned heel and joined the NWO at Super Brawl 8, leading to Ted remaining in Rick's corner. The championship victory and his work with the team showed he could still develop wrestlers and create compelling storylines when given creative freedom. The backstage heat between Ted and management continued building despite his on-screen successes. His storylines became less prominent, and his character development stagnated, as creative attention focused on other performers who had better relationships with company officials. True to his word, Ted informed Bischoff that if he wasn't going to be the spokesperson, they could send him home, and they had to pay him due to his 3-year contract. His WCW contract expired in 1999, and he subsequently became a Christian minister. The circumstances surrounding his departure raised questions about whether corporate wrestling had become impossible for performers who demanded creative respect and professional treatment. Like and subscribe for 100 Years of Luck. Until next time.